Welcome to the Forest of Thought with me, Ingrid Reeser. Today's episode is the first in a mini-series, and I want to take a few minutes to tell you the story of how it came to be. So, during my pregnancy, I first swelled to an unrecognizable size. My hormones danced wildly. I labored and I gave birth and then shrank again, with milk flowing from breasts that were uncomfortably large. My partner, on the other hand, did not gain or lose an ounce. He looked his exact same handsome self throughout the process, maybe sprouting a few more gray hairs along the way. Now, I know that he also went through big changes, including hormonal ones, but the enormous social, emotional, and spiritual transformation that we were going through in becoming parents was much more obviously reflected in my body than in his. I carried and birthed and bled. My body sustained my baby completely, both inside and outside the womb. And I was one and two people at the same time. Maybe it's not even enough to say that my body reflected the changes I was going through. My body was the change. It is the change. And then as I write this, I think, well, maybe that's true for all of us all the time. But when we take women's bodies as our departure point, it becomes so obvious. There's just no way to sustain the illusion that the body and mind are separate. As women come into adolescence, we have the arrival of our first period. Many of us become mothers, where we share our blood with our baby and bleed as we birth. And then, as we reach the height of our powers, our periods stop coming. We enter menopause. So we have this red thread made of blood, and its flows and absences stitch our life together. Our bodies are the receptacle for the alchemy of our rites of passage. And this is a journey that can be both beautiful and difficult, because the monthly bleeds, the childbearing, the menopause, they can be painful, difficult, and even feel shameful. So it's not simple, but I do believe it's potentially sacred. I think I've been previously reluctant to talk about the importance of female biology because it's been used so effectively to oppress women, to put us in boxes where a woman's primary role is to bear children, and where her fierceness and anger was called hysteria or blamed on hormones. It's also easy to slip into ideas about how women should be, or how they should relate to their bodies in order to be womanly. It's understandable that in our efforts to work for equality, we felt the need to focus on how we are all similar, despite differing biologies. But I do think that we've ignored our bodies to our peril. During my pregnancy, I became completely absorbed with these questions. I was in awe of my body, how it could so skillfully make a perfect new human. I thought of how we have all been carried, just as I was carrying my daughter then, by mothers and foremothers in an unbroken line back to when mammals first grew their babies inside the water of their bodies rather than the waters of the earth. And now I have a daughter. The story continues with her. And I felt the need to do something with the podcast, both to share what I was discovering, but also to honor those who came before and those who are yet to come. And I was lucky enough to enlist some incredible women to help us in exploring these blood mysteries. And you'll meet them all in the coming episodes. I have to also say that this is not a quest for universal truth, but it's one exploration, one way to approach these topics in the forest of thought. And also, even if you're not a woman, actually especially then, I hope you'll listen with interest. First of all, because everyone has women in their lives, but also because despite being centered on women's bodies, this is more broadly an exploration of how the body and spirit are interwoven and how we can embrace our corporeality in all its messiness, pains, and imperfections and see what unknown possibilities that opens up for us. I hope you'll enjoy the journey. Welcome to the Forest of Thought with me, Ingrid Rieser. From menarche until menopause, women have a rhythmical companion whose presence or absence tells us something about our bodies. The menstrual cycle is considered by many medical professionals to be the fifth vital sign. So just like our pulse or our blood pressure, it tells us something important about our health. And yet, the general knowledge about it, both in the medical community and society at large, is very poor. Many women struggle with pains and mood swings. Many couples struggle with infertility without understanding the underlying cause of these. So, why isn't the cycle considered more important? And what could change if women stopped berating their bodies for not being the same every day of the month and instead began to adapt to its rhythms? Today's guest is fertility awareness expert Jenny KOOS.
The inconsistency, the fluidity, the adaptability of the female body, the bleeding, the mucus, all of those things, it's really so reflecting of nature and how we are cyclical beings and how we are mammals. Misogyny isn't just the hatred of women, it's the hatred of nature, or fear of nature, I should say, and how it is reflected in the female body.
Jenny KOOS is an author and holistic reproductive health practitioner. She has championed fertility awareness and women's empowerment through body literacy for the past 15 years. I have been following her work for many years, so I was glad to have the opportunity to sit down for a conversation. We talked on Zoom just after the new year, when Jenny was recovering from a cold, and I had just almost been hit by a snowplow truck. So well done us for making it happen. So this is maybe starting to change a little bit, but people's general knowledge about women's health, and especially about their hormonal cycle, is very poor. And just speaking for myself, I didn't know anything about my cycle until I was 24. And that's just, I would have been interested. I just sort of didn't know what there was to know. And I was just lucky that a friend sort of brought us into a women's circle, and she started teaching us these things that I had no idea. And I'm wondering, in your case, could you say something just briefly about how you came into this work? Did you sort of always know that there was more to our menstrual cycle and hormonal patterns than we were being told and what was being taught in school? Or was it sort of something that you realized later on? Could you say something about that?
I think I was always onto it, very early on. But I was, like most of my peers, like being a Swedish girl in a country where contraceptives are subsidized to a large extent, and there's a huge pill norm, so to speak. And I was, like many of my peers, then on the pill between ages 14 and 18, and ran a lot to the youth center with lots of side effects and complaints and issues and checkups. And so I because I had so many issues on the pill, like everything from candida to bleeding heavily with intercourse and all sorts of things, right? I did quite early get the idea that, many things were not told to me, that I didn't seem to deserve the full picture or the full information. And it was very frustrating, but I was really young, so I couldn't really say anything about it. And also I wanted to be on the pill because I wanted to be, to put it crudely, fuckable, because that was what you were supposed to be, and Who cares if you don't have a sex drive and if it hurts when you have sex? At least you're available, right? So that was, that was a sign of the times as well for, growing up. I'm born 87. So this,
I'm
comes
born
out
88.
of, yeah, I mean, the whole culture, like pop culture, it was very sexualized. It was very all about, being available physically as a woman. And it was cool to be on the pill. But I mean, apart from just suffering from those side effects and them being really annoying, running to the youth center, it did kind of, after a couple of interactions, you go, but you're not telling me everything. Like this, it doesn't make sense. Like, how is this okay? And so I think the questioning started quite early, but on more a subconscious level. And then when I was finally fed up with the pills and had tried, through most of the free, the free kinds that I could get, and some of them paid, I think. I just got off it because I thought it was enough, and I told my mother at the time. My mother, she's my mother all the time, but at the time, I told my mother that I can't stand this anymore. I need to get off them. And she said, "Oh, well, I got suicidal when I was on the pill. I haven't been able to
Mm.
take them since I was 20. I've been using the Billings method." So the Billings method, that's a really kind of OG fertility awareness method or natural family planning.
OG, what does OG mean?
Well, original gangster, but but it's a,
It's
it's
classic.
yes, it's classic. It's well known, one of the first ones. And a lot of the science was developed around the Billings method or for the Billings method.
And for people who don't know, that's where you then track your cycle, and in order to avoid or to, if you want pregnancy, achieve pregnancy. Yeah.
Exactly, and there are scientifically verified physical biomarkers that will tell you when a woman's body is fertile or not. And there's kind of two branches within the application of that science into practice, which is natural family planning. And as you can hear, natural family planning kind of comes with some religious values. You can sense it in the word that
Mm-hmm.
it's more about spacing children and planning your family and so on than it is about avoiding, for example, pregnancy because it comes from a Catholic standpoint. And then we have fertility awareness, which is more like the secular version of it, where you have methods and schools more developed that, that has to do with informed choice. It has to do with reproductive agency. It's the same science. It's just like different kind of value systems behind it. But the Billings method was very much anchored in Sweden because the most famous researcher or the most impactful researcher, I would say, Dr. Erik Odeblad or Professor Erik Odeblad, now passed since a couple of years back. May he rest in peace. He did so much work on figuring out the different kinds of cervical mucus and like really examining what's happening with in the cervix to let in or keep out sperm, and what happens with the hormones rising and falling, and how that impacts like the channels where sperm can swim, basically, or not. So there was
So,
actually a book on this in Swedish, which is
mm.
unusual. So my mother knew about this book, which at the time was, the only book on fertility awareness you could find in Swedish, and she bought this for me. It was actually out of print, but she managed to find it somehow, and gave that to me. And so since I was 18, I learned how to chart my cycles, and then I've moved through a couple of different methods, and landed when I was about 21. I wanted to teach and really carry this work forward. And also, I was looking for a training that was secular and feminist, and many of them weren't, because again, they're centered around a Catholic values. So I found Justice College International, and started training with them. And today I'm part of running that school. And I've been doing this most of my adult life, and I've been charting for 20 years now. And I've been helping and like guiding people through charting, looking through charts, analyzing them, correcting them, and so on in the thousands. So basically, my whole life is menstrual cycle charting. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, this method that you then discovered when you were 18, and also interesting that maybe your mom, maybe she had her reasons, but that she didn't share this with you earlier. Because for me, for example, I just had no idea. The only thing that I had heard of was that safe days you cannot be counted on, and that was actually how I came into the world, was like, so so don't count on that. But the fact that there was this scientifically tested and tried methods for charting your cycle, for avoiding or achieving pregnancy was news to me, and which is, yeah, it's interesting. And I mean, but maybe your mom had her reasons for not wanting to share that with you. I don't know.
I mean, her reasons were, she didn't want to get in the way of me taking
Right.
a safe and effective contraceptive.
Of course.
Well, safe, it can be debated, but
Yeah.
it is what it is. And I remember her words exactly was actually, I don't wish for you to have an unwanted child.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and that's why she was, not protesting to me being on the pill. And again, like the times, that's just what it was. And I think there's still discussion very much so about, teaching fertility awareness, which, first of all, we should separate what you're talking about there with safe days.
Yes.
That's what's referred to as the rhythm method. And the rhythm method is really assuming that your cycles are the same length and the same pattern, and that ovulation happens on roughly the same day every cycle, and that you're going to bleed every 28 days and so on. And then you basically guess based on that past data and those assumptions about the statistical parameters of your cycle. And you just assume that it's always going to be the same, and then you avoid sex for certain days according to that calculation. So it's a calculation-based method, and it's not working out very well because the cycle is adaptive. Ovulation is a bit adaptive. Like our bodies do adjust to what's happening to us. So if we're experiencing stress or a lack of food, or a lot of different situations can make ovulation occur later or earlier in that cycle.
Exactly.
Which means that, if you're just counting on, oh, it's going to be the same, sooner or later, it's going to be wrong. And we're actually seeing the exact same thing with most of the apps today, which are using an algorithm also based on past data and assumptions about what a normal cycle looks like. And then they tell people with notifications that, oh, you're fertile now, or you're about to ovulate, or your period should come on Sunday, or whatever it is. And a lot of the time they're wrong. Because again, like the algorithm doesn't know, it doesn't feel what's going on in your body in that
exactly
cycle.
So maybe we need to backtrack a little bit so people understand like what we're talking about. Because like I said, I didn't know about this until I was 24, 25. And even then I was on hormonal contraceptives for another several years until I stopped, and then could actually start to get to know my cycle. So in my late 20s and early 30s. So I think I know that this is something that you talk about a lot, but could you just take us through a little bit each part of the cycle so that we actually know what we're talking about?
Yeah. So we do say that the menstrual cycle starts on day one, which is day one of your menstrual bleed. Obviously, a cycle is a cycle, meaning, the end is the beginning at all times. But menstruation and the start of menstruation is kind of like the low point in the cycle. It's when you're emptying what I like to refer to the flower pot or the planting pot of the last cycle, because nothing grew, meaning you didn't get pregnant. You're emptying the soil of the planting pot that you sort of used in the last cycle. So that's your menstruation. It's the planting soil that you were perhaps supposed to use with a growing embryo, if there was fertilization. So that's why we say that the cycle starts there, also because the hormones that are fluctuating within your cycle are at a low point during menstruation. And in that winter, so to speak. So I like to talk about the menstrual cycle in terms of seasons. That's been done a lot of times before. Like there for thousands of years, we've talked about the menstrual cycle as as the seasons changing. But also something that I came up with over the years to help explain ovulation better to people, to like for people to grasp it, is I'd like to talk about it like an agricultural year. Right. So in the winter, meaning during menstruation, we have all of these small seeds buried underground. And by that, I mean, like in scientific terms, or in what's actually happening in the ovary, is that you have small eggs in small follicles. And follicles are kind of like the eggshells, soft eggshells. And then you have some fluid. And then you have the genetical material, like a little kernel or pit in the middle. And so the ovaries are full of those, and then you have them maturing and kind of rising up towards the what's it called? The surface of the earth, so to speak. So the surface of the ovary. So during menstruation, there's this recruitment of which of these seeds are going to mature, like which a little cohort of eggs are basically going to start simmering away and coming up and sprouting. And you're usually going to have one follicle becoming the dominant, but this takes a little while. So there's going to be a period of time, which could be longer or shorter, like how long this spring and summer is going to be until you actually harvest that fruit that's coming out, is going to, that's like in unpredictable. You basically don't know how long the phase from menstruation until ovulation, meaning like the seeds under the earth, until you're actually harvesting this seed, right? Or this fruit. That's the follicular phase, and that's the variable of the cycle, right? So while that phase is developing, the egg is maturing, there's going to be hormone production from the follicles. And I like to talk about this like, if you have fruits, how are they signaling to the world that they are ripe for the picking, right? Because our fruits are on the inside. It's not peaches hanging from the tree. I mean, if we're walking around in a peach grove, we're going to see which ones are ripe. And they're going to signal, hello, would you like to eat me? Take my kernel out, plant it somewhere else so my species can survive, right? And we can't do that because the fruits are on the inside. So we need to signal somehow else. And that's what we do with our hormones. So estrogen is going to be the primary sex hormone that basically signals to the world through our behavior, attractiveness, scent, and then also these biomarkers that I was talking about before. Cervical mucus is a huge component here. And that's one of those, the major sign that we're tracking in fertility awareness-based methods. So again, a little bit back to what we were saying before about the rhythm method versus fertility awareness, is that with fertility awareness, you're actually watching these biomarkers. You're modifying your sexual behavior according to the signs that your body has given you. Because if you are producing cervical mucus, which then in these methods, you learn how to track this and observe this and interpret this quite, detailed. That's a sign of high estrogen, which in turn is a sign of a really like a maturing fruit, a growing follicle that's becoming dominant and basically just spewing out a lot of estrogen to tell the world that, hello, I'm here. So at a certain point, estrogen kind of hits the ceiling. It's really ripe, and then your brain, sometimes I refer to this like the tree figuring out that, oh, my branches are really heavy now. Somebody has to be done. The fruits are ripe for the picking. I need to like release them from the branches, basically. So when estrogen hits, which is going to be your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland, your pituitary is going to go, oh, let's hatch this egg, more or less. At which point it sends out another hormone called LH, which is luteinizing hormone. And this is what we measure. If you take an ovulation test, that's the hormone you're looking for. It's a hormone from the brain telling the ovary that you can release this egg. And that leads to this process of rupturing the follicle, where the little egg comes out, is captured by the fallopian tube, to lead it down towards the uterus. And if there are sperm who have come in because there was cervical mucus, if there's no cervical mucus, they can't get in. But if there is cervical mucus, which again is going to be mediated by the estrogen from the follicle, then sperm might meet the egg coming like already out up in the fallopian tube. So if fertilization happens, it's going to happen already up there, so to speak, and then it travels downwards and then it burrows itself into the endometrium, which is the mucosal lining, bloody nice planting soil of the uterus, which I then call the planting part. So if you get pregnant, that's going to be like a week-long process of transport of this growing embryo and then kind of docking into the uterus. And if that doesn't happen, if there's no sperm around, then the egg is going to die within 24 hours. But the more interesting part hormonally and like to kind of grasp this process in yourself is you have to consider that the egg is coming out of its follicle, but the follicle, meaning like the meat of the fruit and the peel of the fruit, is still left in the ovary. So this LH hormone that causes the rupture of the follicle causes the actual ovulation. It's also going to transform your fresh fruit, so to speak, into a dried fruit. So I like to talk about this like a fresh plum on the follicular side of the cycle, and a prune, meaning a dried fruit. You know, it's still a plum, but it's going to be changed. There's going to be a different hormonal output. It's going to be a different kind of vibe and taste. And this is what is medically known as the corpus luteum. So the yellow body is because the past follicle, like the used to be follicle, is now this kind of mushed up yellow temporary hormone gland, actually, which is sitting on top of the ovary. And it's holding space, basically, for a pregnancy to happen.
Which is amazing.
Right? So it's like being recreated every cycle. You have this maturing and transformative process of that follicle mediated by LH. And when that's done, the corpus luteum, or the prune, is going to start producing not only estrogen, it still produces estrogen just like it did before ovulation, but now it's also producing progesterone. And progesterone is then like the second sex hormone for us. And in the luteal phase, meaning the yellow phase, which would be then the fall and the beginning of winter in these seasons.
After ovulation.
Exactly. From ovulation until next menstruation. So until the day before you start bleeding again, that's your luteal phase. And this is more kind of fixed in time than the follicular phases, because again, you don't know, maybe you have a bad spring, it's going to be cold, there's like hailstorms and pest attacks, and you could have a bad summer, right? And then that could mean that your harvest is going to be later, or it's going to be poor quality of the fruit or whatever. So the variable in the cycle is the follicular phase, because you might have a really early ovulation or a really late ovulation. You can ovulate like right after menstruation, like on day 7 of your cycle. And you could ovulate on day 103 of your cycle. But once you have ovulated, you have this corpus luteum sitting there, and that has a fixed kind of lifespan. So for you to establish a pregnancy, the corpus luteum needs to live around 2 weeks to provide the stability for this potentially fertilized egg to then burrow into the uterus, right? And for the pregnancy to really like sit in, so to speak, and really establish itself. So you need 2 weeks for that to happen, around 2 weeks. So somewhere between like 12 and 16 days is like the programmed lifespan of the corpus luteum. And if no pregnancy has happened after about like a week into that, it's still going to start degenerating, because it realizes, okay, you're not pregnant. I don't need this flower pot to be full of this nice, I've fertilized and I've fixed, this nice soil for the embryo to plant in. Like sometimes joke, it's like the corpus luteum gets really depressed. It's like, oh, what's the point? Fuck my life. and it starts giving up around like a week after ovulation. If you haven't had conception happen, it's going to start kind of dying off. And within 2 weeks or so, it's going to die completely. And what happens is the hormone production of that corpus luteum, of your prune, basically imagine that your prune is just becoming more and more tasteless and white and shriveled up. It's been forgotten in the back of a cupboard. Nobody wants to eat it anymore. And it's like, you know, and eventually when it does die, your hormones crash because that was the hormonal output of the ovary at this time. And that triggers menstruation. So we're back again at zero. Mm. So when you view this as an agricultural year, one of the reasons I developed that metaphor is because I noticed that it really helped women to be forgiving with their own bodies and to have more of like a healthy, loving relationship to their body, because this idea that we have a 28-day cycle and ovulation happens on day 14, you know, of course it happens and it probably happened a lot more before, but us who have been working with menstrual cycles, like if I ask my teachers who've been doing this since the 70s, they will tell you that, you know, less and less women are having 28-day cycles because of like all these issues that we have in society. It's everything from light pollution to chemicals to, you know, drugs, nutritional issues, lack of sun, lack of movement, you know, lack of darkness in the night. There's so many factors that are changing our cycles, and there's so many just like stress factors that could temporarily move your cycle without there being like it doesn't have to be a pathological issue. It's just a reaction because your body is wise. It's going to go, oh, look at this, I don't know, traffic accident that you were in and all of that stress. Maybe you shouldn't ovulate right at this point because
it's not a good time to have a baby.
Yeah, it's just like, you know, chill, eat something, like lay down, which is, again, you know, makes it very logical as well to understand that if you don't nourish your plant, meaning, let's say you overtrain and you undereat and you undersleep or you live off of caffeine and I don't know, soy sausages, you know, then it's just not going to be enough. Like you're not giving your body the nutrition it needs. And that means you're not giving your soil, like your earth, the nutrition that it needs to grow healthy plants and produce healthy produce.
Yeah. And this is something that you always say that made such a huge impact, or like a big impression on me, which is that the health of your cycle is a very good indicator of your general health, which I had not heard before. And it makes sense. It's like if something is not right with your cycle, it could mean that, I mean, I don't want to put this too strongly because there will, of course, be a lot of variations with what we can consider a healthy cycle. But if you're having a lot of issues with your cycle, it could also mean that there are other things that could also be improved.
It does mean that, yeah. You know, and then, you know, if you're seeing your cycles being completely like up the walls, it's very regular, it's painful, it's, you know, you have troubling symptoms. It is telling you something, you know, and it's of course up to you. If you track your cycle and correlate that with what's happening in your life, then you can also deem whether it's a real serious issue or it's just a temporary, you know, oh, look at my month. It was a terrible month. Look at all the things that I had to go through. Maybe it's not that strange that my cycle is off, you know?
Yeah.
But sometimes it's things that you really need to dig into. You know, like, okay, now this is because it is a reflection of vitality. Fertility is a reflection of vitality. That's simple as that.
And I'm thinking that a lot of people have, I mean, one thing is that your ovulation may be delayed, or also having very difficult symptoms like PMS or having very painful periods. I know that that's something that a lot of people struggle with. And I mean, not to get into all the details of it, but it's following you and your work and also other people who are working in fertility awareness. It's so interesting and also encouraging and heartening to see that people are also able to often improve those things. It's like the nature metaphor or the harvesting metaphor that you give is so helpful, because we can also understand that, you know, our body is trying the best that it can, but it's just maybe needing some nutrients and some help that we maybe don't know how to give it yet, but maybe we can figure it out. And also that each body, each landscape will be different, and that's okay. You know, some people can just seem to be able to go full throttle and not eat nutritious food and just seem to be fine. And other people,
the system is like really robust anyway.
Yeah, anyway,
and it
exactly.
feels unfair to somebody whose system is not as robust and, who react to all sorts of small changes or deficiencies. So sometimes it can feel really unjust because, yeah, just as you say, like it seems so easy for some people. It's like they can abuse their bodies a lot and not have those. It doesn't come out in that way. Like it takes a lot more for their cycle to become off. But again, like you don't know what happens if somebody like that gets pregnant. She might struggle with miscarriages instead. There are many phases to this. So I would say if the cycle is off or if the lifestyle is off, like you always need to take it seriously anyway. And the rule in general is that it will show up in one way or the other, But I think the issue as well is that we have normalized, like in society, we've normalized having problematic cycles. So somebody might say, I don't have any issues with my cycle, but they're, folded double 2 days of their period. They're, hooked on painkillers. They do have terrible PMS or cravings or whatever it is, but they consider it to be part of the female experience. So they don't even consider it to be problematic. There's also this notion that, but my cycle is just longer or shorter. And, to a certain extent, like let's say if your usual cycle is 29 days, then I can buy that. But if what you claim to be your cycle and, your imagination is that is a healthy normal for you and it's like 40 days, I'm like, as a holistic reproductive health practitioner, actually going through those cycles, I can tell you right away that no, there's going to be something behind the fact that you have such late ovulations that you get a 40-day cycle. There is going to be a reason. It might be thyroid, it might be vitamin D, it might be, all sorts of different things, but that's where the detective work kind of starts. What I wanted to say before about the harvesting or the agricultural metaphor is, again, because we've been so conditioned to believe that cycles are just supposed to be like textbook, regular, 4 weeks long, etc. And that's not the case for many. As much as I don't want to normalize irregular cycles and unhealthy cycles in different ways, because we do all have them, I want women to be able to use it as a diagnostic tool. And that's also something that's come out. I mean, it was 10 years ago where the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists came out and basically, it was an article and maybe a study to go with it that said the menstrual cycle is the fifth vital sign. It's just as important as pulse and other important things like breathing rate. And, so that also speaks to the fact that how can that be known? And yet, your menstrual cycle and what it's telling you is not used by the medical system to at all, gauge the overall health of a woman. Instead, when she comes with her complaints and her terrible cycles, she will get symptom management. And sometimes very aggressive symptom management, which is like, let's just wipe out the whole cycle and just do the pill. So you're getting a contraceptive to mask the fact that your cycle is telling you that, hey, we're not well, And, as much as I'm for contraceptives in general, it's a letdown for women in general, because you're missing this incredible opportunity to use the menstrual cycle as a diagnostic tool and to actually help women better their health, instead of telling them, implicitly or explicitly that this is normal because you're a woman, and the only thing we can do about it is to just numb you, more or less, or make you a little bit less female.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so because let's go into that, because then that begs the question: well, why are doctors or nurses not able to help women more in that sense? Is it because they just don't have the information? Is it because they don't want to be seen as telling the women what to do, or that? Because I feel sometimes when people hear someone like you or others saying that there are things that you can do as a woman to improve your health, then it's seen as placing the blame of the women's problems on herself or something like that. While actually what you're trying to do is to empower, like you say, people to use it as a diagnostic tool. So why is it that there is not, because to me it seems like so obvious to look at this in a holistic context and see, I know so many people who have really been helped by that. Why is that it's so difficult for the medical system or the medical community as it is today to work in that way?
Because the medical system, Western medicine, doesn't have a holistic viewpoint. No, it's just that's not built into that system. It's a system of compartmentalization. And okay, let's look at this. And so it's like it's that area and that area. And I mean, we have a lot of other diseases and health issues which also are not being cured because different departments of health or medical, the medical system refuse to talk to each other. And such a simple thing as like, well, depression comes from the gut. Depression will not only be something that happens in your brain. It's obviously going to be linked to everything from nutrient deficiencies to inflammation. And we're not there yet because the system is not built on that. And the female body hasn't been studied properly. I spent most of my days looking through, scientific papers and studies on different aspects of female health. And every day I'm struck by the ignorance of the researchers themselves. Because even though you might be looking at like really interesting, intricate parameters, and you might be really onto something that I'm like, oh, this is good. Finally, they're looking at this. And it might be something like, I don't know, melatonin's involvement in ovulation or whatever. And then you read through it, and as somebody who's, again, like I've spent my whole life researching this and understanding the menstrual cycle and viewing it in real time with the person in front of me and the menstrual cycle charts telling the story, having the scientifically verified markers to correlate this with blood work and all of that, so I feel like by now I have a pretty good grasp on how it's working, but that has not been given to me through any of these sources, because you have to puzzle it all together and you have to apply, I don't know what the word is. There's probably a really nice philosophical term for this, but, just this interested, keen eye to put it into perspective, like we are living organisms. And that's why I really like the metaphor as well, because we understand these things when we look at a tree or a plant. Like we understand it when we grow things. So one thing I like to say as well, I sometimes talk about like we're strawberries, and so in Sweden every summer at midsummer we eat strawberries. Like it's part of the midsummer ritual. You need to have really red nice strawberries, and you're going to have them with cream and sugar and all that, and they need to be delivered right on this particular day, right? So by the 25th of June or whatever, whenever it falls, you need to have strawberries. And some years they're just not there, or they're not tasty, they're not done, they're not ready enough or whatever, and we have to import them from somewhere else and they become really expensive, But nobody is angry at the farmer the way women are angry at their own bodies for not ovulating on time. So this is what I meant before about, finding compassion and love for your own wise body by looking at it from this natural lens. Because, science is supposed to explain nature, but when you take nature and its variability and its, the constant movement and cyclicity of nature, when you take that out of science, it becomes absurd, which is why we have so many interesting studies on different things, but they make no sense. Or the researchers are researching again like these super interesting things, but I can read in their conclusion that they don't understand the female body because there's no training today, apart from maybe like the disease training, that I'm teaching. But there's no, like in medical school, if you're training to be a gynecologist, even, you're not getting much of that holistic viewpoint of like, how does a woman's body really work? It's more about where is everything located? What do we do when that's bleeding? How do we stop this? How do we block that? So that's what Western medicine is. And so I think the real value in like, I would say admitting to the fact that we are part of nature. Like we're not above nature, we are nature, and our cycles is a reflection of everything else. So when we look at, for example, a plant, let's say you get this really nice orchid, of course you're going to check how much light and how much shade and how much water and what type of nutrition does it need, if you want it to flourish. But we don't apply the same thing to our own bodies. So like we basically run around in this society abusing our bodies. And I'm not saying that that's women's fault. That has a lot to do with patriarchy and how society is built. So it's not necessarily like we're, mindfully going around abusing it. But we do lack, and I would say the medical system really communicates that as well, but it doesn't matter. It's just like bad luck, or it's just because you're a woman, so you don't really get that. You don't get the empowerment, the information, the perspective needed to go, okay, so how do I deal with this signal that my body is sending me? It shouldn't be that painful. It shouldn't be that cumbersome to have a cycle. It's not something that should feel like it hits you every month and you're like struck by it, So again, with the harvesting metaphor, I'm seeing that it fosters this this grounding in, taking responsibility for it. For your health and for your fertility and for your just general well-being, and also this forgiveness, because again, like as women in this culture, we tend to blame ourselves, not just for being women, and then we just become really gender dysphoric about it. Like, oh, this is what it is to be a woman, right? Like that's a recipe for gender dysphoria if I ever heard one, right? But also this just general, we're so hard on ourselves. Like, oh, my ovulation is irregular. What a bad body I have. Like, oh, look at this machine. It's all broken. Like, why doesn't it function like it should? And as soon as you start thinking about it, like, but, again, with the strawberries, are you going to be mad at the strawberries? Are you even going to be mad at the farmers for not delivering them? It was a bad spring. Like we can all see it. Every farmer in the world knows that you can't like start nurturing your crop and, but with the manure, like you can't start with all of those things right before harvest. That's a long-term project.
It's a long-term project, and through several seasons, because that's the other thing. It's like, it's not just what we do this cycle, but it's the accumulation of things. And also to realize like it's hard to try to live cyclically in a world that values linearity. And that's just, we're supposed to be sort of delivering and performing the same every day, even though that's not at all what our bodies want to do. But I think there's so much in what you said now that is just so interesting. And one of the things that I wanted to do with this series of episodes that I'm doing now is kind of look at this thing where the things that are maybe difficult or challenging for women. So it can feel like people can feel like having their menstrual cycle is a curse, or like having to bear children is a curse, or like having to go through menopause. There's something that is like a punishment for us or something. While there can also be a shift in which we see, well, we don't have to say that it's easy or comfortable or always nice, but we can also see it as a companion, as a guide, or it's something that can help us. But what I'm finding also interesting in what you're saying is this. It kind of connects to this feminist perspective as well, that I know that you've also talked about, where I think that within certain strands of feminism, maybe it's changing now, but where talking about the body is seen as anti-feminist, because it kind of is making us, I I guess probably because our biology has been used to oppress us so long. Women were seen as, their main function being to bear children, or as hysterical. When our anger is seen as hysterical, and even the boys at school having this, "Oh, what are you on your period?" comments. It's like it's as if talking about those things as real is it's as if feminists fear that will enable this kind of oppression to continue. While it feels like actually when we have been ignoring our bodies and saying that, because there's been a drive to say that men and women are the same, of course, we're of equal worth. But somehow in that struggle, something has been lost. So I don't know, what are some of your reflections on that?
Yeah, I have many reflections on that, and some of them I think I need to think about for another 10 years before I write them down. Um, but I believe that, around the rising of the pill, the launch of the pill, that's around the time, right, where we had first wave feminism. We had like rights to vote and all those things happening. And the first wave of feminism was really interested in the female body and safeguarding the female body, and lifting it up and celebrating it and so on. And then the pill came, and the whole movement was basically hijacked, because if you look at it today, the way, the corporate interests of the drug companies have been woven into the idea of how a woman should live and what freedom for us is and what health for us is. I'm constantly baffled at like how modern feminists can look at the propaganda, which is all around us all the time, about how women need to be medicated their whole lives for one reason or the other, against their femaleness, against their female nature, can look at that and seriously think that that's progress, or that's freedom, or that's rights for women, because there's a difference in saying, yes, we should have access to everything that could potentially benefit us on an individual level and on a group level. Meaning, I also think that abortion and the pill and all these things should be accessible to women, and that we should have informed choice around all of those options. That's not the same thing as saying, which is more or less the communication now, I feel, both from the medical system and from feminist organizations, saying that, the best we can do, basically, which is a whole different wave of feminism, and they basically look down on the first wave feminists who did a lot of work, right, with women in mind. Now there's an erasure of what it is to be a woman, and also a conflation of these like corporate interests with, oh, the best thing for you is to, first be on the pill, and like, no, you don't have to ovulate and you don't have to menstruate. Like, that's completely unnecessary. It will only give you iron deficiencies and ovarian cancer. And then it's like, oh, you can't get pregnant. Well, it's your right to have children. So now we're going to fix you up with some IVF or some ICSI or some surrogacy or like whatever it is, right? And that's all industrial interests, They're not developed specifically to make women healthier or feel better or be more fertile, It's made to manage the female body. And I'm not demonizing them whatsoever. Like, we should, again, have access to these options, but we are not giving the full information about it. Far from it. There's so many lies and inconsistencies in the narratives around these drugs and how they're being pushed. And there's a lot of corruption happening between the medical system and the medical professionals, having words put in their mouths by the industry. So how you can ignore that and say that this is for the benefit of women, and then you go on after you've had those kids, it's like, oh, now you're perimenopausal, pre-perimenopausal, and then you're perimenopausal, and then you're menopausal. And all of these stages need to be managed with hormones or hormone blockers and painkillers and antidepressants. And again, it's not about them not being like, of course, we should be able to get them when we need to. And we also, I mean, I don't have an unrealistic, I think it would be an unrealistic expectation to think that just because women get the knowledge about, the menstrual cycle being the fifth vital sign and how you can work with it as a diagnostic tool, not all of us are going to be able to fix our cycles. Basically, none of us are, because society and the way that we have to live in Western society is still going to, block many of those efforts. Like, it's very, very hard to have like a functioning body at all in this society. So I don't have the expectation that, oh, if you just know about this, then you're going to have this perfect clockwork cycle and have as many kids as you want and whatever. That's not going to happen. But I also strongly reject the idea that, to be able to live as women, we need to have our female bodies managed not by nutrition, not by, proper sleep and better work schedules and all those things, but by drugs all the time. And it's incomprehensible to me that we have a feminist movement that is not rising against that particular narrative. It's just like, how can you say that you're speaking for women? How can you not notice how this is? Yeah, you see what I mean, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because it matches so well. In this podcast, I talked to a lot of people about, our relationship to nature. And again, like you already said, it's realizing that we're not separate from nature, and we're not separate from those processes. And just like the strawberries, we need the same things. And then that bumps up again against, cultural norms, cultural expectations, and, maybe our own ideas about what we would like to be doing. Because it's also that, maybe we want to be able to push our bodies in a way that our bodies just, they're just not having it. And I found personally that there's a certain freedom in listening to my body's limitations. It's interesting. It's like by sinking into it, by leaning into the messages from my body and the messages from my cycle, it opens up a space rather than limits a space. I don't know if you can relate to that, but it's and I've had to adapt certain things. Like I was vegetarian mostly for many years, and reading about the prune, for example, realizing it can be quite good for the body to have, animal proteins, animal fats to build the things that the body needs. And so my body was clearly telling me that when I was trying to get pregnant and during pregnancy and during breastfeeding. So, I changed that, and that worked well for me. Do you want to say something about why go through the effort of sort of tracking your cycle? Because I know it's, for example, it's tracking the cervical mucus. It's also tracking the temperatures every day. Once the temperature goes up by a certain amount, you know that your ovulation has happened.
Your basal body temperature, yeah.
Your basal body temperature, then you can know that ovulation has happened, and so then you can know how much time is left of your cycle, more or less. So you can know when your period will come, and we can start to adapt our food, our nutrition, our rest, knowing that during the period, maybe you need more rest. During the spring, you can start building up energy. You can start working out more. During summer, you're maybe feeling like, wow, I have so much energy. I'm superwoman. That's not a good time to make plans, by the way, for the rest of the cycle. And then, learning to sort of start to slow down during the fall, and being okay with not being at 100% during that time, because you can't expect to be, nobody expects the cherry blossoms or the cherries to be ripe all the time, like you said. So what are some of your thoughts about that? Like, not just the physical, how we feel physically better, but also, the emotional, the spiritual, the interpersonal. I don't know. What have you learned about living with your cycle in that way during these years?
I think above all, it's a comfort to me to know what's happening. most of the time. I mean, I don't always know exactly what's happening underneath the surface, obviously. But by now, I mean, having spent my whole adult life in very close relationship and, with eyes open and interest and a love for all these processes, I mean, I don't live a perfect life at all. Like, I'm certainly no health guru in that sense. I do things all the time that sabotage my health, as do most of us, right?
Mm.
But when I do, I see the effects.
You know the
And
reason.
yes, I know the reason. I can take responsibility for it. I don't have to, wonder what's wrong with me when something happens. And I think that's the main gift of this is like to be able to monitor myself again in a loving way to go, oh shit, now this is happening. Well, maybe I can adjust this next cycle, or you know what, to hell with it. Like I'm gonna have this cup of coffee and I'll have terrible PMS for a week and a half, but it's gonna be worth it because I really need this coffee right now. Like I need this, like, you know, to get me through this day, and there will be consequences, but I am on top of those consequences. I know what's happening. I might even be able to mediate it a little bit. I might think more about, what do I combine that cup of coffee with? Should I maybe have some cream and sugar with it? Should I maybe increase my magnesium afterwards to make sure that I kind of, um, just moderate the things that affect my life and my body in a conscious way. And that makes all the difference. I mean, my poor husband is, impressively enough, not tired of listening to my endless, investigations into what's into what's happening to my body. Like every night he gets a lecture. It's like, you know what? I measured my hormones in urine this morning, and it just perfectly correlated with the mucus. But then I took my temperature, and it didn't align today. And I don't know, And I might go, I'll tell him which ovary, like around the end of my period, I'll tell him which ovary is going to pop in about a week. And he'll know basically which way to turn with his penis. He'll go like, okay, I won't push you so hard on the right side because I know you're going to have this big bubble there that's going to hurt you. So I'm going to like, lean a little bit to the left this cycle. And then I'll be like, well, last cycle it was right and now it's going to be left. And he's like, okay, I'm turning this way. Then is it okay today? Is it better? It's just like all these little things that might sound tedious to somebody else. It might sound like it's too much, but it's enriched my life so much because, I mean, like everyone else, I have health issues. Like I have struggles and things happen, and I have this awe for my perfect body who's really just doing the best it can, right? And which is like my body is making decisions that are intelligent. It's wise decisions. I might not like them. I might not enjoy, the effects of it. But like again, back to nature, it's like it bothers me so much. I mean, I work a lot with women who are trying to get pregnant or couples who are trying to get pregnant. And then they go through these absolutely like super rudimentary, worthless, in my opinion, fertility investigations, when the doctor or the clinic is trying to like figure out why you can't get pregnant after a year. And the checks are so basic. I'm not saying they're completely worthless because again, it's interesting information, but it's like miles and miles away from a full actual assessment. And I'm thinking, if we put on, I don't know, Planet Earth or any type of like National Geographic, anytime nature film, like documentary, and you see this film about, oh, well, the frogs are swimming in this river and they were exposed to this particular chemical, or they didn't get enough, I don't know, of this nutrient or the sun or whatever it was, and they stopped reproducing. Or we had too many females being born, and it's going to lead to the extinction of this species, That's all very, kind of alarmist and well, rightly so, and logical when you watch it. And then, these women, humans, are going into the very advanced modern medicine clinic to be assessed, and they come out with a diagnosis of unexplained fertility, without, toxins and nutrients and all of these things being checked. They're
Mm.
basically being checked to see, okay, is there anything like an obvious blockage? That's good, obviously, to know that there's no like mechanical issues. And then they have their ovarian reserve, and let me not even get into that today. I have a lot of opinions about the term ovarian reserve and the hormone AMH being used as an assessment of fertility, which is, yeah, stupid. But it's just they're really just scraping on the surface and kind of stating the obvious or stating that we can't see anything obvious,
Mm.
and I think if we can do all of these tests of the water of certain amphibia in, I don't know, the Amazon, and figure out what is making them infertile. Why? Like, why can we not do that for women?
Mm.
It makes no sense. Either it's because we don't care about women, and we don't care about fertility. And why would we not do that? Well, because there's an industry benefiting of the fact that we don't know more than we know. And
Well, it's like you say that veterinarians have a better understanding of the reproductive health of mammals. I mean, if you would just apply the knowledge that they have of other mammals to humans, that would give a more accurate picture than a lot of the information that we're giving in doctors' offices.
yes, and there we're looking at basal body temperature as a marker of metabolism and fertility, and we're looking at cervical mucus in cows. It's a lot more cervical mucus and a lot more obvious than it is with humans, but we all have it. So yeah, it's fascinating how we can have a doctor's training that doesn't include these perspectives that the veterinarians get, right? It's just baffling to me.
Mm.
And I mean, sometimes I talk about it very, harshly, but I think it's necessary for people to like really understand that there must be a reason, again, why we're ignoring so much information that we could have gained about humans and human fertility and the female body. Because it's really available. I mean, we could do this. We have the technology. We're advanced enough to do this. I think we have to think about it like this, which is very dystopian and dark. But if we were selling human babies, to eat, or just like the way we do with cattle and
Mm.
animals, that are being held. If there was an industry that benefited from actual healthy mothers and healthy babies, we would see more of the science that's applied in agriculture and in, keeping cattle and all this, because they care a lot about which nutrition, for example, the ewes are getting. So you're going much more into, like what's the natural habitat of this animal? What do they need for their species to thrive? Because you're selling the meat, you know? And apparently with humans, as we know, well, unless the surrogacy industry becomes so big that there's actually a market for, breeding the most healthy mothers, surrogate mothers, and the healthiest of babies, as a product, then we would see that science be applied. But that's not where the money is for humans. For humans, the money is in the treatments and the drugs and the symptom management. There's apparently not a huge interest in, and you could call that, because once you start thinking about like, oh, breeding the best quality humans, then you get into eugenicism and all of, it becomes quite dystopian as well when you think
Mhm.
about designer babies and, all of that. But it's still true, though, that, we're talking more about how to design the perfect baby through science and growing them outside of the mother's womb in an artificial, whatever. There's more talk about that and more interest, I would say, politically in that and IVF than it is in public health. Because healthy mothers and healthy babies it's a public health issue. And if the interest, like if the goal really was public health and increasing the birth rate and, having a healthy population just in general, then where the money goes and where the initiatives lie scientifically, medically, etc., would be very different. It's just, that's the.
But how do we, what do we do in the face of that? Because I feel like it's often, a lot of people, the people who are actually working with women to give them IVF or who are doctors and nurses, there's nothing sort of, sinister about. People are usually genuinely trying to help, but they're stuck within a system where they are also not given the things that they need in order to provide good healthcare. But also, just like you say, it's hard to get money for studies that show you that you don't need to take any medicine. You could just go outside of the sun more and or change your diet in a way that's not expensive or something. So there's these systematic problems that there's corruption and people who are greedy, and then there's also systemic issues that are not really they're not intended, but they end up creating a lot of problems. But what do you think we do in the face of that? Just keep going.
Yeah, but I think the most radical thing that you can do today, and I mean, again, kind of back to your question about like, what has it given me to be this fertility aware the way I am? Well, I think that's the most radical thing you can do nowadays.
Is to create that knowledge for yourself and to help others as well find that.
What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help particularly Swedes, but like I'm internationally as well, but Sweden really needs it.
Yeah.
Like Sweden really needs it. To get people to understand this part about like just we're part of nature. The same thing that works for almost every other living thing is going to work for you because you're living on this planet. And again, you're part of nature. You're a natural being. You're a mammal. Just again, look at the nature documentaries, and look at yourself. Why it doesn't make sense, the lifestyle that we're being promoted. And again, that says nothing against medicine. Like, I'm not against medicine. Who would be? I mean, that would be stupid, right? I've been accused of that so many times, by like whenever you say something like that, somebody's like, well, look at vaccines and, it's really good that we have antibiotics. And I'm like, yes, of course it's good. And I used it just last month. I took antibiotics, because I needed it, But I do not buy into the idea that modern advanced human life means being hooked up and dependent on a multitude of drugs to cover up the fact that I'm not living the way a mammal needs to be living. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's not empowering. It's not feminism to be completely dependent on both like fertility suppressing or enhancing treatments, which are really just bypassing whatever issue it is I'm dealing with. Because if I'm dealing with problematic cycles and I'm using the pill to basically quench all of that because I'm shutting down the cycle when I'm using those types of contraceptives, so then I obviously won't feel any cyclical issues because I don't have a cycle, right? And that's a very like barbaric approach really to health. I don't consider it modern. I don't consider it, smart. Doesn't mean it doesn't work. I mean, I totally understand that, if I was suffering from horrible PMS and wanted to throw myself off of the balcony 2 weeks of every month, then being on the pill might be, the best thing for me as an individual. And I want women to have that access, that it still doesn't make it a smart and like very advanced type of medicine. It's quite aggressive and it's quite, disrespectful, really, of the subtleties of our nature and like all of the intricate workings of our body. It's very like, just kill it and then you get this and then you can manipulate. You can have this medically induced withdrawal bleeding every month. And sure, that's all great if that's what you decided for yourself. But I would like to have options, and the same thing with fertility enhancing treatments, which are not really fertility enhancing treatments because they're not enhancing fertility in themselves. It's bypassing the issues and forcing the body to ovulate, despite the fact that it's telling you it can't. You
Right.
know, it's telling you that, it's not, well, that doesn't go for all types of infertility. Obviously, there are a lot of sperm issues as well, which kind of goes for the same thing happens, right? For one reason or another, like fertility or conception is not happening, and you're now either forcing the woman's body to ovulate or basically raping the egg with a sperm that you chose to just inject, despite what we know scientifically that the egg chooses why a particular sperm does or does not enter the egg. And the disrespect for for the wisdom of the body within those treatments, it enrages me. And I'm not saying that means that we should never use them in these techniques.
Yeah.
But, we could use them intelligently, and we're just not. We're using them very, again, like barbaric, and it's almost like it's an assault on this delicate system, and there's no recognition of like why it does what it does. And then I'm sitting here not being a medical professional whatsoever, and not performing any, I don't do any medical examinations or physical examinations, but I do look a lot of blood work. And I can immediately see, like, somebody could have gone through like 7 rounds of IVF, and they're really suffering. They've had so many side effects, and the grief and the loss and the treatment, the trauma of being there, being poked and prodded, and it's needles and it's drugs. And then I look at their blood work, and they have this like extreme vitamin D deficiency that nobody thought to look at. And I'm like, which creature on this earth is living entirely without sun? You know, does it make sense that the plants will grow without sun? Where do we get vitamin D from? The sun. And it's just, yeah, it baffles me every day how we can call that modern medicine.
Yeah. Yeah, and also because there are, when you start looking just a little bit holistically, seeing, I mean, for some people it takes a lot to change an unhealthy cycle, but for some people it's just, they stop drinking coffee and then they get pregnant, or they start eating meat and then they get pregnant, or they stop working out too much, or they start eating more fat, and like all of these examples that you gave. Or for men as well, just that you mentioned, that makes me think how we often forget to talk about that men also can do a lot to change their fertility, if it's called that for men as well. Like they can change so much quite easily because their sperm, they have new sperm happening all the time, and so they can also do a lot. But the expectation is always placed on the women to go through all these treatments and to take on the whole responsibility,
which is telling.
It's very telling. It's very, very typical. Speaking of the lack of sort of true feminism in these issues, and so I think that what you're saying, like we forget that we're a mammal, and I think for some people, just like thinking about the fact that they're a mammal somehow, I don't know, maybe it triggers something uncomfortable. And while it's just a sort of acceptance of our bodily and animal nature. But what I find also interesting is going into our mammalian sort of reality, it can also somehow bring us closer to ourselves and sort of the more spiritual aspects of our relationship with the world and with each other.
Absolutely.
And so there's this kind of, it's not a paradox, but it can maybe feel like a paradox. It's like by going into our bodies is the way that we come into relationship with that which is greater than ourselves. Or that's the way it has been for me. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do. I think we have to examine, especially as a woman, trying to, reflect on these things and figure out what you need to believe or, act according to feel good and empowered in this world. Especially if you consider yourself a feminist, I think we need to think about the term misogyny and realize what misogyny really is, because misogyny isn't just the hatred of women, it's the hatred of nature and how nature is, or fear of nature, I should say, and how it is reflected in the female body. Because if you feel uncomfortable thinking about yourself as a mammal, you need to go back to Descartes and to, all of these white men throughout history who call themselves philosophers, who laid the foundation of like society's idea of superiority. And this, of course, goes into white supremacy and that as well. Like that's that's definitely a branch of it. But in general, just like man's need or want to dominate over nature and to separate himself from nature, to say that mind is over matter, and that the body is just something that we what I'm thinking is the most important thing. That's the arrogance of man, right, and of humans in general. And I think we're always going to have that. It's kind of the bane of having this developed brain that we do, that we're still, we're not developed enough to quite deal with that, So, for example, just the thing like that, I was talking to my husband the other night, of like just the difficulty of staying in the now. It's like, yeah, the intelligent, like, the human brain is so aware of the past and the future that it can never quite be just here like mammals are. And it is causing us a lot of distress, right? And it's also causing us a lot of distress to imagine that we're above nature all the time. And that's a very long tradition. And it is being communicated in our medical system and in our society in general. Like Western society is built on the idea that we can just, rape Mother Earth and take all her resources, and that we're above her and that we're not really natural beings. But with the female body, it constantly reminds man of that.
Right.
And that's why birth is, just desecrated the way it is. Why they applied all of these ideas about like, oh, you should open your cervix 1 centimeter per hour, otherwise we need to medicate you because you're not opening it. The inconsistency, the fluidity, the adaptability of the female body, the bleeding, the mucus, all of those things. It's really so reflecting of nature and how we are cyclical beings and how we are mammals, and they hate it. All the men hate it, and especially the men who founded all of these ideas that, society is supposed to be built on. And if you, as a woman today, consider yourself to be a feminist, and, you're looking for female empowerment and all of that, and still, you react with, feeling uncomfortable at that notion that, you're a mammal and you just need to respect the fact that you're a mammal and you need the same things, like every other mammal does. Like you need community, you need physical touch, you need sun, you need nutrients, and you need like a diet that's actually, specific to your species, which is an omnivore diet, and all of this. You need water, you need sleep, all of those things. You need physical exercise. And otherwise you will get sick, and that's just the way it is. If that for some reason like makes you uncomfortable, I think you need to examine how brainwashed you've been by this very concept, because misogyny is not just about women, it's about nature, and if you hate misogyny or you want to end misogyny, that's where you need to start.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to add about like just the things that we've been talking about how do we, I have here female cycle as a symphony was the last thing that I put in. I mean, just hearing you talk, it makes me think about how, the cycle is like, it's like this force almost. It's like a force that is sort of pouring through us, despite everything, and we can listen to it or not, but it's going to be there, and it's not going to go away. But I don't know, is there anything else that you want to add to the things that we've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, just on the topic of the symphony, like I make a lot of these different type of metaphors in my books. So the first one was released in 2022. And it's being updated now in Swedish. It will be translated to English one day. I just haven't had the time. And I'm writing on the second one. I make a lot of these like analogies about, for example, symphonies and rhythms and so on, because and then I'm referring to the endocrine system as a whole, which I mean, obviously both men and women have cycles, right? They just look a little bit different. And the endocrine system functions a bit like a symphony, and um, the way I use that metaphor is again to point to how a lot of the treatments that we're having, and again, not saying that the treatments are worthless or medicines are useless. It's just that, the medical system as it is today, it will, let's say you have an orchestra playing badly. Like it doesn't sound any good. It's
Out
uncomfortable.
of tune.
Yeah, it's quite out of tune. And what you do is you just increase the volume on something.
Right.
It's like, oh, let's put, raise the strings, lower the bass or whatever it is. And and sure, it might work, but it doesn't help the orchestra play better per se.
Right.
An orchestra needs to play together, and yes, you could have some support and you could take in an extra violinist or whatever, but to come in and just like shove the mixer the mixer tabs everywhere, like up and down, is rarely going to help. And that's exactly what I'm referring to with this like insensitivity that we have in modern medicine, that you just supplement, like, oh, there's lacking this hormone, let's put it in a synthetic version and just hope for the best because we have a lack, there's a deficiency, so we're going to add it. And sure, sometimes it's the right thing to do, but it's also very insensitive. And until we kind of acknowledge that on a bigger scale, until the medical system itself and the people who work within it and the people who work in research can really admit to the fact that that will always give you some downstream issues. Like that approach with any medicine, there's going to be side effects. There's going to be, some type of reaction in the other end that you might not even have been expecting. And sometimes you are expecting it and you're just accepting it and you add another drug to it to deal with the side effect, right? And I just think, we have to move on. Like we have to, that's why the rise of functional medicine is happening and all of that.
Functional medicine. What's that? Just super briefly.
Well,
Yes.
functional medicine is a branch of like precision medicine when you're really looking at the root cause of things instead of just managing the symptoms.
Which makes perfect sense.
Yeah, which is, needed if you want long-term health, if you want long-term results in something and not just be, consistently medicated your whole life, which again, yeah, might be the solution, but in an individual case, but as a medical philosophy is quite, disappointing.
Yeah.
And I think it's especially disappointing in 2026. And everything that we're learning by looking at like the fertility issues people are having and menstrual cycle issues that women are having, it's a perfect flag. It's a very obvious red flag. But for some strange reason, fertility, again, being an indicator of vitality, is considered its own problem. Again, like its own department. So you don't really connect. Just today I read an article, about how few babies were being born, and they were trying to frame it like it's because women don't want to have babies anymore. And I mean, I'm sure that's true for some. It's not the best world to send, but it's never been. I mean, if you look at it like that, like there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, I don't want to like birth kids into this world," and I'm like, well, in many ways, it's the best world we've ever had. What if your ancestors thought like that? Like it's always going to be problematic, right? Because we are problematic and life is hard, But anyway, they were framing it like it's because we're just not having them. And me working in fertility awareness and in like helping people get pregnant, I can tell you there's a lot of women who just simply can't.
Exactly.
Because like we have a crisis in fertility, not in birth rate in itself. We have a crisis in fertility in general, and how that fact how they can avoid using that, like media, politics, all of that. When I say they, I mean, society at large, how that is not being used as the ultimate red flag for public health is beyond me.
Yeah.
It's so obvious. Just, fertility is the sign. And that's why us who work in this field and actually see it play out in real time and see all of the markers happening and like watch the menstrual cycle charts and what they tell us, it's impossible for us to stay in the kind of mindset of what is considered modern medicine. We always turn to functional medicine and other, forms of medicine because it's making no sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much, Jenny, for taking time and for sharing your incredible well of knowledge with people. It's really very much appreciated.
My pleasure.
You'll find links to things we talked about in the episode description. This was the first episode of the Blood Mysteries mini-series. I have some great episodes coming up, including with trauma and sex expert Kimberly Ann Johnson, mythologist Sharon Blackie, and others. So stay tuned for that. Remember to follow the show and that you can sign up for the free newsletter at forestofthought.substack.com to get episodes straight to your inbox. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.